Okay, looks like that's recording. Look back over here. Up, down, 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 up, up. Okay, looks good. Let's go ahead and get that timer started. Hi everyone, it's Jenny Bramble. I am so excited to be presenting at Pacific Northwest this year. I think this is my third year running. Love this conference. The keynote I want to present to y'all today is called Testers Are the Connectors of Your Team. Like I said, my name is Jenny. I've been in software testing for most of my life at this point. Absolutely love it. You can find me over at Willow Tree Apps. That's in Durham, North Carolina, so I'm coming to you from the other coast. My two cats are Dante and Dax. Usually I would offer you a sticker, but we're a little bit far apart. So hit me up next time you're at Pacific Northwest. My pronouns are she and her. My career has absolutely been built on communication. Like I said, I've been in testing for most of my life. Before that, I was in tech support. Before that, I was a waitress. Before that, I was a small child who had no cares in the world. Here's the biggest thing I've learned over my career, over the dozens of companies I've worked at, the hundreds of teams I've been on, the bazillions of people I've interacted with. Communication is absolutely key. When you're a waitress, you're listening for the right order, you're listening for allergies, you're trying to make sure that everyone is happy at the table, and balancing really hot plates. When you're in tech support, it's all about what's the actual problem? Not the problem they're telling me they have, but the actual problem. And as a tester, well, I have an entire presentation about that one. Here's the thing. Testers are the connectors of our cross-functional teams. We sit at a really interesting junction of the software development lifecycle. In a lot of ways, it revolves around us. Every piece of the team is connected to testing, connected to testers. We are in an incredibly unique place to bring our team together, to bring people outside of our team together, and find connections within the team that boosts everyone's job performance and makes us better at what we do. We touch all phases of a project. There is no part of a project that doesn't need testing. When you're in the design phase, you can start looking for design crashes. You can start looking for user flows that maybe you want to test or don't want to test. Not to mention designing the testing itself. Oh my gosh, what type of testing are you going to do? What's applicable to this project? Do you need to investigate something to do load testing with? Is security testing a thing? Are there boundaries? We touch every piece. After the product's been released, when you're measuring stuff, you want to ask a tester what they think, because we've seen it all. We can tell you why some trends are happening and why they might not be. We talk to all parts of the project team. There's no part of the project team that I haven't talked to in the past week, possibly in the past day. I'm constantly communicating with other testers, constantly communicating with developers, constantly talking to my project manager, to my technical requirements manager, to my designers, to everyone that has a say in the project, because these are all views that I need in order to do my job, in order to figure out what expectations we have for this product and how to move it forward. I need to talk to everyone. And I have an overview of the project. No one has seen the project like I've seen the project. I've tested everything. I've thought about everything. I've gone down paths. Instead of just focusing on one feature, I can look at the whole project and say, hey, here's how these pieces fit together. My favorite story about this is a couple of jobs back. I was working on two separate teams at the same time. Always fun. And one of my teams said, hey, we want to implement a drag and drop file uploader. I'm like, cool, we already did that. Like, no, we didn't. We haven't done that at all. It turns out my other team had actually just done the drag and drop file uploader. This team didn't have any idea about it. But I was able to bring them together and say, hey, y'all, we can reuse this. We don't even have to really go through a lot of testing on it because I've already tested it. Just drag and drop the drag and drop. Makes it easier, makes it more usable. Testers hold the mental model of the system in their minds. This is my absolute favorite Jasmine quote, and it's so true. You see everything. You have a bird's eye view into the application like no one else on the team. In short, we don't just test. We document features. If you've written any automation in the past ever, that's documentation. I do so much risk analysis. I am constantly, probably obnoxiously obsessed with risk. I do find defects. I examine and set expectations for the project and learn. I teach, I educate. I'm doing it right now, but I do it on my teams all the time. I love to sit down with someone and say, hey, let's learn about this. Let's talk through these features. And I ask questions. I'm basically like a 5-year-old with a half a cup of coffee. I never shut up. I determine requirements. I test. More than anything, though, everything I do revolves around communication. It is about communicating what I need to do my job, what you may need to do your job, what the project needs to be successful. I am communicating constantly. It is a constant sort of thing. And agile teams are built on communication. You can't have an agile team that doesn't talk to each other. You can't have a scrum where no one says anything. You can't have a refinement where no one says anything. These pieces of communication are what drive us forward, and they're what make us successful. And testers do so much of that communication. We are constantly communicating. Without the communication between the different parts of the team driven by testers, we wouldn't know what to test. We wouldn't know what's been tested. We wouldn't know what the expectations are. We wouldn't know what we're releasing to production. We wouldn't know anything about our project without test, without that communication. And here's kind of the other thing. A lot of what we communicate is not good news. We're not really sitting there constantly being like, great job, y'all, we're killing it. We're saying that, hey, the expectations I have are not aligned with the code that you've given me. We're saying there's defects. We're saying we need more time. We're saying this doesn't work. We're saying that thing that you just spent a week building, you got to do it over. We find UX that isn't user-centric. What does it mean when we're doing so much communication, but a lot of it's negative? What does that mean? It means an opportunity to influence. Because we put a lot of negative communication out there, because we're the ones that are driving a lot of this emotional impact, we can actually influence the culture of our teams, the way our teams communicate, and that will spiral out to the rest of the company. We can influence the way the entire company operates by communication within our teams, by kindly connecting and communicating with everyone around us. And it means a responsibility. We have an absolute responsibility for supportive communication. Psychological safety is the #1 driver of team performance, and a large part of that is being able to honestly and openly communicate. If we as testers and connectors can actually model psychologically safe, open, and honest communication, we can really change how people communicate, how they relate to each other, and how software is built. We are that powerful. And it means connecting our teams, because we do so much communication. If we do that in a supportive, open, honest, psychologically safe way, we can create better products because we're creating better people. Communication is what lifts our morale in rough situations. It's what keeps us together. As testers, with this overview of our teams and our companies, we can find the people to solve the problems that we have. We can communicate with them, and we can connect these parts of the company together to solve bigger and better problems. If we are known as safe communicators, as people who can speak hard truths, then we can really impact so much. And people will absolutely want to communicate with us and work with us. So let's talk about communication for a minute. Let's be honest, we're going to talk about communication for a few minutes. Communication is the absolute cornerstone of agile teams. It is the cornerstone of any team. Football team but European, baseball team, swimming team, rowing team, any kind of sports team, any kind of professional team, they all communicate. There are so many strategies for quick, efficient, gorgeous communication, and that's what we need. We need to be these connectors. We need to be these communicators. It helps create our products and our team morale and, honestly, our joy at work. So I want to actually talk to y'all about a few different communication styles. I want to talk about giving and receiving, and then styles of communication within that. So when you're communicating, you have a giving and you have a receiving style. You'll find a lot of times people say something like, oh, they can give it, but they can't take it. And what that's saying is their giving style and their receiving style are a little bit different. Or they're jerks. So whenever I'm communicating with someone, I want to make sure that I'm communicating in their style, not in my style, because what that's going to do is it's going to let them receive the communication I'm trying to give them without having to change their listening style, particularly. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more here. You may have guessed my natural style tends to be prose and stories and emotion and drama. I mean, heavens, look at this hat. I want you to feel everything I'm feeling, because emotion is how I connect with you. It's how I connect with anyone. It's how I think about the world. I see things in color. I taste music. All of these things are incredibly impactful and emotional to me. And that's my natural style for pretty much everything. This doesn't work great for everyone. I tell this story a lot, but I used to work at a company when I was a baby tester, and they would ask me, is the build green? Are we good to release to production? And I would say something like, yeah, I feel really good about it, or the build makes me sad. And DevOps would kind of look at each other and be like, sad. Like, yeah, sad. That's not the best way to communicate with people who are extremely logical and not extremely emotion driven. It would have been better if I'd said something like, you know, I found a bunch of defects in the past week. I don't think we're ready to release. But instead I went with sad because I was a baby tester, and that was the best way I knew how to communicate. Made sense to me. This is especially true when I'm talking to my developers. Developers tend towards being more logical, more fact-driven. We'll get into that in a minute here. And when I just throw emotions at people that aren't ready to receive those emotions, it's not going to go well for either of us. They're going to be frustrated. I'm going to be frustrated. No one's going to be doing any actual communication. So how do we communicate with people then? How do we actually handle this? I'm going to teach you how I talk to 3 different styles of people in the hopes that this lets you be a better connector on your team. And if that straw looks gigantic, it's because I've actually got bubble tea over here because I'm an adult. The first type of communication that I want to talk to you about is fact-based communication. This is where someone is extremely fact-driven, extremely logical, extremely straight line. I find this a lot in developers. That's a stereotype. Sorry, y'all. What I want to do here when I'm communicating with someone who is really a fact-based communicator is I want to use facts. I don't want to assume anything. I want to use a lot of detail, show examples. It works really great if you sit down with somebody and like, hey, can you show me? Or let me show you. Be very cognizant of their time. You might have guessed, I can take up all the time in the world if I want to. So I need to be very cognizant that this should be quick and efficient communication. And I want to approach them with fully formed ideas. This is not the kind of person that I go to when I have a half-formed idea that I need to talk through. This is someone I want to approach and say, hey, I have this fully formed idea. I know what's going on. Let's make it happen. So when I want to improve my communication with them, the best thing to do is to ask them to teach me something. I really love sitting down with someone who is a fact-based communicator and asking them to run through something with me. Like, hey, can you teach me how to use an enum in this particular situation? Can you show me how to do this particular thing? What happens then is they actually become a little bit more invested in you. Now, the caveat here is that you can't just be like, okay, teach me something, and then fall off the map. You should go continue to learn that thing, and next time say, hey, you know what? I learned a little bit more about that really interesting thing we were talking about. Thank you for showing it to me. What that's going to do is that's going to make them a little bit more invested in me, and I can actually waste a little bit more of their time whenever they are more invested. They know that I'm someone worth talking to, someone worth having this conversation with. The next person I want to talk about is a summary-based communicator. And when I say summary-based communicator, I'm talking about someone who is really not interested in the details. They want the big picture. They want they want some charts, some really nice graphs. I'm talking about my project managers for the most part. Love y'all. So what I want to do here is talk in broad strokes. They don't need the minute details of what's going on. They don't need to know exactly how I got from point A to point B. They just want to know that I got to point B and it was great. So I'm going to summarize as much as I can. Now, this is an interesting thing because half-formed ideas actually go pretty well with a summary-based communicator because they're really good at pulling ideas together. So if I've got a half-formed idea that I want to talk through, that's one of the people I'm going to go to. And I'm going to say, hey, Ralph, can you sit here and help me just talk through this really quickly? Here's a summary. Here's a couple of details. They'll generally ask really great questions and be able to lead you to a much better answer than you would have come to by yourself. When I have trouble with a summary-based communicator, here's my biggest tip. Ask them to help you with your emails. Now, I don't mean ask them to respond to your emails or clean out your inbox. Lordy heavens, no. What I mean is if I've got an email that I've been writing, I will go to them and say, hey, Blake, can you read through this email and make sure that I'm communicating what I think I am, and make sure that this is what I want to say, and it's phrased really well. This is fantastic because it's going to teach you so much about what they're looking for in their communication, and it's also going to make you a better communicator with outside influences like clients. And that's where I use this the most. I will be talking to one of my project people and I'll say, hey, I need to send an email to Rachel. Can you read it over for me? Especially if it's a client that they're familiar with, they will have great advice. And again, they're going to become a little bit more invested in you because now they've started teaching you how they communicate. You just have to pay attention and learn. All right, this is me, y'all. I am a story-based communicator. I want to hear a story. I want an emotional response. I want you to extrapolate. I want to hear everything. I daydream. I get lost in stuff. Whenever you're talking to me about something, if you walked up to me and was like, you know what? I am feeling incredibly purple today. I would look at you and be like, wow, me too. I am feeling so purple right now. And it would absolutely make sense in my brain. Might not cross that barrier, but it makes sense to me. And this is just how I communicate. This is the sort of thing that I'm looking for in my communication partners, is that emotion, that spark, that moment. Now, if you're like basically everyone I've ever worked with, you probably have issues communicating with me. So here's what I want you to do. When you have someone who is a story-based communicator and you want to make a stronger connection with them, ask me about my goat. Her name is Fruit Pie. She's wonderful. She's about a year old now. She likes cookies, like literal cookies. She's kind of a diva, honestly. And that's what gets me invested. Feeling like you care about something about me that is purely emotional and purely fluff makes me more interested in communicating with you, because I feel like you see me as a person. And I know some people are like, oh, I don't want to hear about Robert's children for the 14th time. You're just going to have to tough that one out, y'all. Ask me about my goat. Ask me about my cat. If I had children, ask me about the children. What that does is it makes me feel like you see me as a person and not just an information receptacle. Honestly, it's kind of a good tip for almost anyone. If someone has a thing that they have expressed a lot of interest in, remember that and ask them about it later. You're going to find a lot of people respond incredibly well to that. Like I said, her name is Fruit Pie. There she is hiding behind Buckley. I love her. Here she is in a bucket. That was the second or third time she got her head stuck in that bucket. And yeah, with those tips, what happens when it goes wrong? Now, I said that we are the connectors of teams, that we bring people together, that we are the nexus of these teams, that we do so much of the communication that we can absolutely influence our culture. So what happens when we do it wrong, when something goes bad, when there's someone we just cannot connect with? Well, try a different medium. And I don't mean like a psychic. You could try a psychic if you wanted to, but that's not what I mean. Some people communicate poorly verbally. Some people communicate poorly over text. One of my absolute favorite developers at a previous job, he was English as a second language, and he was really self-conscious about his English. He didn't want to be seen as dumb. Everyone was saying, oh, I'm having such a hard time communicating with this person. It's so difficult. And I realized if I texted him or messaged him over our chat program, he was incredibly responsive and just incredibly willing to help me out with whatever I needed. It turns out because he could type the responses, he felt a lot more confident in his English. And we communicated like that for a few weeks. And then his personality really started coming out in meetings, because I had shown him over those few weeks, I don't think you're dumb. I am willing to meet you where your communication needs are. And I think you're great. The strange ending to this story is that I accidentally taught him the phrase YOLO. So every time we were asking for a estimate on something particularly difficult, he'd be like, oh, we'll just YOLO it. Which was hilarious. And we didn't YOLO anything, I promise. And when all else fails, continue to communicate. Continue to try. There are going to be some people that you can't always communicate with, and there's going to be times you get it wrong. But as testers and as the connectors of the team, This is the biggest service that we can bring to the entire software development lifecycle. By being people in that space that say, yes, we communicate, we're going to model good communication, we're going to pull people in from different places to solve these problems, we can really change our teams for the better. Again, man, the biggest thing I've learned, my entire career comes down to one phrase, and that's communication. That is the testers or the connectors of our cross-functional teams. We are so good at communication. We're so good at pulling in disparate things and making them into a whole. By doing this for our teams, by being the person that makes sure all of the communication is happening and is psychologically safe, is supportive, is effective, is efficient, is right for the circumstances, we can train our teams to be better. And that's because of the place that testers sit on the team. And it's because we are the most important cog in the wheel of software development. We are what makes it tick. If you don't have testers, you don't know what's going into the build. You don't have assurances that it's been tested properly. You don't have the kind of confidence that you can have with a really great tester who just wants to communicate and wants to make everything around her better. And that's you. That's us. That's everyone watching this. We are all the people that are sitting at the absolute nexus of our teams. We are the people who can turn a team around, who can change the culture of a team, the culture of a company. We can change the freaking world, y'all. Because we're the communicators. And if we communicate thoughtfully, if we communicate safely, we will do that. You will do that. That's my keynote, y'all. I hope you have so much fun with Pacific Northwest this year. Find me on Twitter. Go ahead. Give me a couple of shout outs. It'll be great. And, let's communicate. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.